Why did her hands shake when no one was watching? She had trained for years, carried rifles heavier than her own body weight, walked under the crushing silence of deserts and forests, lived through nights when cold and fear pressed against her chest so tightly she thought her heart would stop. Yet here she was, sitting in a dimly lit barracks, boots planted on concrete, elbows on her knees, trying to still the tremor in her fingers. It wasn't weakness, not exactly, it was memory. The hum of the fluorescent light above seemed too loud. The night outside was alive with distant engines, movements of men who had been told only enough to keep them compliant. But she knew more. She always knew more. And knowledge was heavier than gear. It pressed in, invisible but crushing, until silence itself became unbearable. Her call sign wasn't written on any board, not spoken in any room. She was an addition nobody requested, a shadow tucked into the roster at the last minute. The others would glance at her, unsure if she belonged, then look away. They didn't see the hours, the failures, the long road that brought her here. They only saw the unknown, and soldiers hated the unknown. She exhaled slow, her palms finally stilled. Fear wasn't something you erased. It was something you carried, like a blade hidden inside your chest, reminding you that you were still alive. The door opened. Light spilled in. A corporal stepped in, helmet under his arm, glancing at her as though searching for something in her eyes. He said nothing, just a nod, just enough to remind her it was almost time. But she wasn't ready. Not yet, because there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The convoy rolled out under the cloak of midnight. Engines murmured low, headlights hooded, radios whispering codes she had memorized but never trusted. She sat in the back of the last Humvee, her rifle resting against her thigh, eyes locked on the darkness slipping past. Wind smelled of sand and diesel. The air was tight with expectation, the kind that made every breath short, every blink too long. She could feel the others watching her when they thought she wouldn't notice. A new face always carried weight. A woman's face carried even more. "Where'd they pull you from?" a voice finally asked. Not hostile, just curious. She turned. The man beside her was older, his beard peppered with gray, his expression tired but open. His tone held no edge, only fatigue. She studied him for a beat before answering. "Somewhere far," she said. Her voice was low, calm, not inviting. He nodded as if he understood more than her words admitted. He looked away, adjusting his vest. And just like that, silence settled again. The truth was complicated. She wasn't here because someone wanted her. She was here because she had asked, no, insisted. And no one had fought her hard enough to stop it. The radio crackled. Orders murmured through. Coordinates. A location she had repeated to herself 100 times in the last week. They were heading into a place none of them wanted to see, yet she had begged for it. Her pulse quickened. She clenched her hands, pressing them into her knees until the tremor disappeared again. By the time they reached the drop zone, the sky had shifted from black to something softer, though no sun had yet touched the horizon. A ghostly gray stretched across the land. The kind of light that made shadows longer, fears sharper. Boots hit dirt, gear clicked. Soldiers muttered quick words, half complaint, half ritual. They checked each other's straps, touched shoulders, nodded without speaking. Small human gestures in the face of what waited ahead. She stayed slightly apart, watching, listening, letting their rhythm settle before stepping into it. But the lieutenant noticed. His eyes landed on her, sharp and assessing. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened, his message clear: prove yourself or don't. There was no in-between. And maybe that was what they feared most, that she wouldn't prove anything, that she would freeze when the air turned violent, that she would cost them something they couldn't afford. She felt the old pressure return, that blade in her chest, that reminder: fear is here and so are you. Hours stretched. The patrol moved slow, weaving through ruins that once held lives, stone walls scarred by time and fire, windows broken, doors hanging from rusted hinges. The silence was heavy, too heavy. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place. She scanned rooftops, shadows, corners where darkness pooled. Every step was a negotiation with uncertainty. The older soldier walked near her, the one with the tired eyes. He spoke once, low enough no one else could hear. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question. She didn't answer, just a faint tilt of her head. He gave a soft grunt like he understood anyway. Then he looked ahead, shoulders stiffening. Good, because some of these boys haven't. She wanted to ask why he said it, wanted to know what haunted his voice, but words were precious, and in places like this, silence was safer. Still, she felt the weight of his unspoken truth. Some of them wouldn't come back. And though she carried her own reasons for being here, she felt something tighten in her chest for them. Their youth, their unspent lives, their nervous glances at doors and windows. She didn't know their stories, but she carried them already. That was the curse of memory. Once she took them in, she would never let them go. The shot came without warning. Crack, sharp, splitting the silence. One of the younger soldiers stumbled, dropped to a knee. His cry was quick, raw, stunned. Chaos followed, shouts, commands, boots scattering for cover, the old rhythm shattered, replaced by panic's brutal tempo. She dropped flat against the ground, scanning, breathing steady despite the rush in her chest. Fear pressed hard, but she had trained for this moment, the moment when fear was loudest and calm mattered most. Her eyes tracked the rooftops, shadows shifting, a glint where none should be. She found him. Her rifle rose, steady, smoother than her pulse. She didn't pull the trigger, not yet. Because something stopped her, something she had seen in the half-second reflection of the scope. Not the shooter's face, but the way his shoulders moved, the way his finger trembled on the trigger. It wasn't just an enemy. It was someone else carrying fear just like her. And in that heartbeat of hesitation, she remembered. She hadn't told them everything. Not about why she was here. Not about the face she still saw every time she closed her eyes. The convoy had rolled out with orders, but she had carried something heavier. Something that made her finger hover, her breath slow, her resolve tremble. Because tonight wasn't just about the mission. It was about the choice she hadn't made yet. And in that pause, as the firefight erupted fully around her, she whispered to herself, "Not yet." The others didn't hear. They couldn't, but her words lingered, half promise, half confession. And they would matter, when the night forced her to decide who she really was. Why didn't she fire when she had the chance? The question burned even as gunfire cracked across the alley. Dust burst from stone, bullets chipped walls, and voices shouted orders drowned by chaos. But inside her, silence roared louder than the fight. She had the shot. She could have ended it in a second. Instead, her finger hovered, frozen not by doubt in her skill, but by something deeper, something she hadn't told them. "Move, cover left," the lieutenant's voice cut through, harsh, clipped. She rolled behind a broken wall, pressing her shoulder against the cold stone. Her rifle hugged close, the scope still echoing the image of that trembling finger on the rooftop trigger. Whoever that shooter was, he wasn't steady. He wasn't calm. He wasn't the faceless monster they were trained to imagine. And that unsettled her more than the bullets did. The young soldier who had been hit groaned nearby, clutching his leg. Blood seeped fast, dark against the pale dust. Two others dragged him behind cover, voices shaking but steady enough to do their job. Their fear was loud, but their hands didn't falter. She crouched, breathing slow. Her heartbeat wanted to sprint, but she refused it. This was what training demanded, calm inside chaos. But calm didn't mean clear, not tonight. Because as the lieutenant barked orders and the squad returned fire, she wasn't just seeing rooftops and angles. She was seeing something else. A memory. Another rooftop. Another finger trembling on a trigger. And the face of someone she had once known, someone who hadn't walked away. The blade in her chest pressed harder. The squad fought with urgency, firing controlled bursts. The older soldier, The one who had spoken to her in the Humvee moved with deliberate steadiness, as though he had lived this moment too many times before. His eyes flicked to her once, sharp, almost questioning. But he didn't ask, not yet. The lieutenant, however, didn't hide his suspicion. Between bursts of fire, his gaze cut to her like a knife. Why wasn't she firing? Why was she crouched there, waiting, watching? She adjusted her grip, raised her rifle again. The rooftop came into focus. But the shooter was gone. Only a shadow where he had been, a ghost. The others hadn't noticed, too busy suppressing, pushing forward. But she saw the absence, the space left behind. Whoever had pulled the trigger was moving, retreating, shifting into another angle, and that knowledge sat heavy on her tongue. She could have called it out, could have warned them, but for reasons she couldn't name, she stayed silent. Maybe she needed to see where he was going. Maybe she needed to know why. Or maybe she was just afraid of what her own voice would reveal. Minutes stretched. The firefight thinned, then stilled as silence crept back like a tide reclaiming the shore. Smoke hung in the air. Bricks and dust smelled burnt, sharp. The squad tightened, regrouped, breaths heavy but disciplined. The lieutenant scanned the rooftops with hard eyes. One down, one injured, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Then louder, we move, now. They began to push deeper into the ruins, slower, sharper, every shadow now a threat. She stayed near the back, her steps measured. Her eyes scanned rooftops, windows, every line where a figure might emerge. But beneath her watchfulness, something else gnawed, the question she couldn't answer. Why had she hesitated? Why had she seen the shooter not as a target but as something else? The others didn't know, couldn't know, but she did. Because this wasn't the first time. The patrol slowed at a choke point, a narrow street, collapsed stone walls funneling them into a single path. The lieutenant cursed under his breath, signaled two men forward to check angles. The squad spread thin, tense. She moved to cover a side alley. The older soldier shifted near her, his rifle sweeping, his eyes steady. Back there, he murmured, not looking at her. You had the angle. It wasn't accusation, not entirely, more curiosity. Her throat tightened. She considered silence, but silence carried weight, and weight drew suspicion. I saw something, she said quietly. He glanced at her then, brief but sharp. What? She shook her head. Doesn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than anything. The older soldier studied her a beat longer, then nodded once, as if shelving his question for later. But she knew he wouldn't forget. Men like him didn't forget. The choke point cleared. The squad pressed on, weaving through tighter ruins. The young soldier with the leg wound limped with help, jaw clenched against pain but refusing to be carried. His face was pale, but his pride burned hot. She watched him, silently admiring the stubbornness. She knew that kind of pride, the kind that said, if I fall, it will be because I chose to, not because I couldn't stand. It reminded her too much of someone else. A girl she used to know. A girl who once stood in the same silence, rifle in hand, refusing to show weakness. A girl who had made a promise and broken it. Sorry. The memory pressed sharp. She swallowed hard, forcing focus back to the present. But the past never really let go. Hours blurred. The patrol found no more contact, only the echo of footsteps they never caught. Shadows shifted, but no enemy showed. By dusk, they reached their temporary hold, a gutted building with enough walls to give cover, enough height to post watch. Soldiers dropped gear, unwrapped rations, tended wounds in the fading light. The rhythm of exhaustion replaced the rhythm of fear. She sat apart again, cleaning her rifle, movements methodical. The older soldier sat near, silent at first, then spoke softly. You've lost someone. The words weren't a question. Her hand stilled, her breath caught. He didn't look at her, just stared at the wall across from them. I see it, the way you carry it, heavy, quiet, like you don't want anyone else to know. Her chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, to deflect, but denial would sound hollow, and she was tired of hollow things. So she said nothing. He nodded slowly, as though her silence was answer enough. And for the first time that night she felt something strange, not suspicion, not judgment, but understanding. Later, when the squad settled into uneasy rest, she lay awake, eyes on the ceiling, rifle within reach, ears tuned to every shift of wind. Sleep wouldn't come, not here, not with the weight in her chest. Her thoughts drifted back, unbidden, to the rooftop in her memory, the one that had never left her. It wasn't this place, it wasn't this war, it was years ago. A mission gone wrong, a friend beside her, a shot she didn't take. And the cost? That face still lived inside her, haunting every silence. The face of the one she couldn't save because her finger had hesitated, just like tonight. She had come here chasing that ghost, begging command to put her on this mission, even when no one asked for her. She told herself it was about the target, about the intel, about the objective. But in the quiet, she knew the truth. It wasn't about them, it was about her. She wasn't here to complete a mission. She was here to finish a memory. And tonight, when she saw the tremble in that rooftop shooter's hand, the past had slammed into the present so hard it had almost broken her. She rolled onto her side, fists clenched. This wasn't weakness. It was resolve, unfinished, unshaped, but burning. And if she didn't shape it soon, it would consume her. But there was one thing she hadn't considered. Someone else in the squad hadn't fallen asleep either. And tomorrow, when the sun rose, she would find out just how much they had seen, both in her silence and in her hesitation, and whether they would let her carry her secret alone. Why was he watching her instead of the horizon? The lieutenant's eyes cut through the dim morning haze like blades. He didn't speak, didn't have to. Every time she shifted her weight, every time she checked her rifle, she could feel his stare pressing against her back, searching for cracks. Soldiers didn't trust easily, and in the middle of nowhere, trust was the only thing holding them together. She rose with the squad as dawn painted the ruins in pale orange. The sun broke over the horizon, sharp and cold, throwing long shadows across the crumbled streets. It should have felt like hope. It didn't. The young soldier with the leg wound gritted his teeth as he walked, leaning on his buddy for balance but refusing to stay behind. His lips were tight, jaw sharp, every step an act of defiance against his own body. She watched him limp, and something in her tightened. That kind of stubbornness, the refusal to be left behind, it was dangerous, but she understood it too well. Because wasn't that why she was here? Because she had refused to stay behind, even when she should have. The patrol moved on slower now. Silence clung to the air, heavier than gunfire. Every alley looked like a mouth waiting to swallow them. Every rooftop whispered of unseen eyes. And still, the lieutenant kept glancing back. She knew why. Because last night, when she had the shot, she didn't take it. The squad halted near an abandoned courtyard, the walls painted with old scorch marks and graffiti worn to ghosts. The lieutenant motioned two men forward to scout ahead, his movements sharp, precise. His hand signals cut the air like knives. "Set perimeter," he muttered, low but enough to reach her ears. His voice was taut, coiled. The soldiers spread. Boots scuffed against stone, gear rattled faintly. The older soldier, grizzled, quiet, moved near her again, his steady presence a counterbalance to the tension bleeding out of the lieutenant. He didn't look at her this time, just sat on a broken wall, eyes scanning the horizon, rifle balanced across his knees. But his words came anyway, soft, almost like a thought slipping free. "You hesitate like someone who's seen it before." She froze. Her hands stilled on her rifle, her chest tightened. He continued, eyes still forward. "The ones who have never been hit don't hesitate, they rush. They want to prove something. The ones who have lost, they think twice." Her throat went dry. It wasn't accusation, it wasn't judgment, it was recognition. And it cut deeper than any suspicion. She didn't answer him. Couldn't. The words stuck like shrapnel in her chest. Instead, she adjusted her gear checking straps that didn't need checking, hoping the silence would swallow her truth. But silence didn't last long. The lieutenant stepped close, shadow falling over her. His tone was harder, sharper. "You had the angle last night." The words weren't a question. She lifted her eyes to meet his, calm, controlled. "I didn't have a clean shot," she said. It was the truth, but not all of it. His jaw flexed. He leaned closer, voice low enough to be private but heavy with warning. "I don't care what you think you saw. Next time you take it, or I'll pull you out myself." He didn't wait for her reply. He turned, barking orders to the rest, his voice echoing against broken stone. Her pulse steadied. Her face stayed calm, but inside the blade pressed deeper. Because he was right and wrong all at once. She could have fired, but something inside her had stopped her finger, something the lieutenant would never understand. Not unless she told him. And she couldn't, not yet. The squad moved again, weaving through tighter streets. The heat grew heavier, pressing down like a hand. Sweat slicked under helmets, breaths shortened, tempers frayed. But discipline kept them moving, every step measured, every glance sharp. She caught fragments of voices as they walked. Quiet jokes, nervous mutters, the rhythm of men trying to keep their humanity alive in places designed to strip it away. One soldier whispered about his daughter, how she'd be starting school soon. Another murmured about a letter from home he hadn't read yet. Small confessions, shared with the ground more than each other. She listened, silent, carrying their words inside her. Every confession became another weight, another life she didn't want to see broken. And yet she knew the truth. Some wouldn't make it back. The thought gnawed at her, not because it was new, but because it was. She had seen it before. Flashback. Rain, a rooftop slick with water. Her rifle pressed against her shoulder, scope fogging at the edges. Beside her, laughter. A voice teasing her for the way she clenched her jaw, too serious for her age. "You'll break your teeth before you pull the trigger," the voice had said. She had smiled then, brief, reluctant. But the smile didn't last. Gunfire erupted. Chaos swallowed their perch. She froze just for a second, 1 second too long. And when she moved again, when her finger finally pulled, her friend was already falling. The memory snapped back like a whip. Her chest burned. She blinked, forcing the present back into focus. The patrol ahead slowed. The lieutenant raised a fist, signaling halt. She exhaled, steadying her hands, but the past lingered, clinging like wet clothes. They found another choke point. Another place where the world seemed to conspire against them. Narrow walls, collapsed rubble, too many blind corners. The lieutenant cursed again, signaling flanking maneuvers. The squad spread thin, nerves stretched taut. She took the left flank, moving low, scanning every angle. Her scope cut across windows and doors, tracing lines where danger might wait. And then movement. A shadow flicked across a rooftop. Her chest seized, her finger tightened on the trigger. But when the scope locked, it wasn't the enemy she saw. It was a boy, young, too young. His hands shook as he clutched a weapon too big for him. His eyes were wide, terrified, darting between alleys. Not a soldier, not in any way that mattered. Her breath caught, her finger froze again. Because in his face, she didn't just see him. She saw the ghost of the rooftop years ago, the one she had lost, the one she hadn't saved. "Target," the lieutenant's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Report." She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The boy's eyes locked with hers through the scope, fear against fear, human against human. Her heart pounded, sweat stung her brow. If she fired, the squad would be safe. If she didn't, they might not. Her chest burned, the blade twisted. And again, her finger hovered. "Not yet." The lieutenant's voice rose sharper. "Target, do you see him?" She forced breath into her lungs, forced her voice into the radio. "Negative," she said. The lie slipped out smooth, practiced. The lieutenant cursed, ordered the squad forward. The boy disappeared into shadow, slipping like smoke. And she lowered her rifle, her pulse crashing like thunder. Because she knew this couldn't last. Not the hesitation, not the silence. Soon someone would notice. And when they did, her mission, her secret, her entire reason for being here, would burn in the open. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for that fire. Why did her silence weigh more than gunfire? The squad pressed deeper into the ruins, each step heavier than the last. The streets were quieter now, but not in a way that comforted. It was the kind of quiet that felt intentional, like something watching, waiting. Every soldier felt it. Their movements grew tighter, eyes sharper, breaths shorter. But when silence pressed against their nerves, it pressed against her differently. Because for her, silence wasn't new. Silence was memory. And memory didn't let go. They halted in what was once a marketplace. The skeletal remains of stalls leaned like broken teeth, charred timbers jutting from the dirt. The lieutenant paced slowly, scanning rooftops with restless eyes. His suspicion had grown into something harder now, something dangerous. She kept her rifle close, gaze steady, posture calm. But she felt him circling her with his eyes, waiting for a crack. The older soldier broke the tension first. He slid down against a wall, unwrapping a ration bar, his tone casual but his words deliberate. "You ever think about what this place used to sound like?" he asked. A few heads turned. One soldier gave a faint snort, shaking his head. Another muttered something about markets and kids. But she froze. Sound, laughter, the hum of life that had once filled streets like these. It pressed against her memory like salt against a wound. "Yes," she said softly. The older soldier's eyes flicked toward her then, catching something in her voice the others didn't. But he didn't push. Not yet. The lieutenant, though, he pushed. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across her again. "You saw something back there," he said, low and sharp. "On that roof. Don't lie to me." She lifted her chin, calm, masking the blade twisting inside. Negative, empty roof. His jaw flexed, his eyes narrowed. For a moment she thought he might call her out in front of them all. But he didn't. He just leaned in closer, voice cutting, quiet. "You hesitate again, and I'll put you on the truck home myself." His words weren't a threat, they were a promise. And she knew he meant them. The squad moved again. The heat of the day pressed down harder, sweat rolling under armor, fatigue gnawing at discipline. But no one broke rhythm. Fear kept them sharp. Fear kept them alive. She fell in near the rear, rifle sweeping corners. But her mind drifted, whether she wanted it to or not. Back to another patrol, another day that began like this one. Back to the rooftop. Flashback. It had rained all morning. Not the heavy, cleansing kind of rain, but the thin, biting kind that soaked into fabric and skin until you felt it in your bones. She remembered the sting of it on her cheeks, the way water slid down her rifle, dripping into the scope. Beside her crouched a girl with dark hair tied back, her grin bright even under gray skis. Her voice was soft but teasing, cutting through the cold. "You're too stiff," she had said, nudging her shoulder. "Relax or you'll miss everything." She had rolled her eyes, hiding a reluctant smile. They had been inseparable then, training together, failing together, pushing each other through the kind of nights that made grown men fold. And on that rooftop they had been more than soldiers, they had been sisters. But when the shots came, when shadows rose on the opposite roof, fear struck faster than resolve. She had hesitated. 1 second too long. And when her finger finally pulled, her friend was already falling. The sound of her body hitting the roof still echoed louder than gunfire. The present slammed back, dust, heat, boots scuffing against rubble. She blinked hard, steadying her hands on her rifle. but the memory lingered, heavy as stone. She wasn't here for the mission. Not really. She was here because of that rooftop. Because the boy she had seen yesterday, the fear in his eyes, the tremble in his hands, had looked too much like her friend's last moment. And she couldn't bring herself to repeat it. The squad reached another hold point by nightfall, a skeletal building with enough walls to give them rest, though no real safety. Soldiers dropped gear, muttered complaints, cleaned weapons. Exhaustion pressed heavier than armor. She sat in the corner, methodically stripping her rifle piece by piece. Her hands moved with practiced ease, but her mind wasn't on the weapon. It was on the rooftop. Always the rooftop. The older soldier settled near her again. He didn't speak at first, just chewed slowly on a ration bar, eyes distant. Then, without looking at her, he said, "You've lost someone." The words hung between them. She froze, fingers tight on cold metal. He didn't push, just added quieter, "We all carry ghosts, some of us just carry them louder." Her chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, to bury it, but denial would sound like weakness, and weakness was blood in the water. So instead she said nothing. And in that silence he nodded, as though her silence was answer enough. Later, when darkness fell and the squad drifted into restless half-sleep, she stayed awake. The stars above the broken roof seemed too sharp, too cruel, the kind of sky that reminded you how small you were. She thought of her friend again, the grin, the voice, the warmth that had vanished in a blink. And then her thoughts turned to the boy on the rooftop. Two faces, years apart, both trembling, both holding weapons too heavy for their hands. And in both moments, her finger had frozen. Her blade wasn't fear, not exactly, it was guilt. And guilt was heavier than any weapon she carried. But the truth was sharper still. She wasn't just haunted by the one she had lost. She was here because the one they were hunting, the target buried somewhere in these ruins, was connected to that rooftop long ago. Not directly, not in blood, but in consequence. And if she finished this mission, if she pulled the trigger when it mattered, it wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about redemption. The lieutenant stirred nearby, restless even in sleep. His suspicion hadn't eased. If anything, it grew with every step she took. And she knew, tomorrow when the sun rose, her silence would no longer be tolerated. She would have to choose. The mission. Or the ghost. Why did dawn always feel like betrayal? The first light broke across the ruins in cold streaks of gray, slicing through shattered walls, glinting off twisted steel. To any eye, it might have looked like renewal, but to soldiers, dawn meant exposure. Shadows vanished. Cover shrank. And every step forward felt like walking onto a stage lit for the enemy. The squad moved out anyway. Boots crunching rubble, rifles raised, silence thick. Each of them carried the weight of night's half-sleep, the gnaw of hunger, the itch of nerves stretched thin. And she carried something heavier. Not hunger, not nerves, but the sharp, growing edge of decision. The lieutenant walked at the front, as rigid as the barrel of his rifle. His eyes swept corners with restless precision, but every so often they cut back toward her, watching, measuring, waiting for her silence to break into a mistake. The older soldier stayed closer to her this time, not shielding, not protecting, just there, like he had seen ghosts before and knew they walked loudest in the morning. They moved through streets that looked more like open graves than pathways, windows shattered into black sockets, doors kicked in long ago. A bicycle rusted against a wall, its chain slack, its tires eaten by time. It was too quiet, and every soldier knew it. The lieutenant's fist went up, halting them at an intersection. He scanned, jaw tight. The squad spread out, rifles covering alleys, eyes searching for movement. She knelt, scanning rooftops, nothing but broken edges, nothing but sky. But her chest tightened anyway. Because silence wasn't safety. Silence was the moment before a storm. The storm came. A sharp crack split the air, then another, then the world exploded in gunfire. Bullets tore into walls, spraying dust and sparks. Soldiers dove for cover, shouting, cursing, returning fire blind into smoke and shadow. The street filled with the roar of rifles, the snap of rounds whipping too close, the hollow thud of grenades slamming concrete. She threw herself against a wall, rifle snapping to her shoulder. Her scope caught movement, a muzzle flash from a shattered window. She adjusted, exhaled, squeezed. The enemy vanished in a spray of glass and dust. But then another figure rose, and her breath froze. A boy, thin, barely older than she had been when she first carried a rifle. His hands shook as he braced the weapon, eyes wide, fear cutting through the smoke. Her finger tightened but didn't pull. Not again. The lieutenant's voice ripped through the chaos. Take the shot. She didn't move, couldn't, her crosshairs locked, her hands trembling with memory. And in that half-second, another shot rang out but not hers. The boy's bullet tore past, striking the ground inches from the lieutenant's boot. The older soldier dropped the shooter with a clean burst before he could fire again. The lieutenant spun, fury burning through the dust and smoke, locking on her. You froze, he snarled, voice sharp even through the firefight. You froze again. The words hit harder than the bullets, harder because they were true. But she couldn't answer, not here, not now. Instead, she turned her rifle back to the fight, forcing herself to focus. One target, another, movement on the rooftop, a flash in the alley. She fired, reloaded, fired again. Every shot mechanical, automatic. But guilt burned hotter with each round. The firefight raged longer than minutes should allow. By the time the echoes began to fade, the street was a scar of smoke and ruin. Bodies, theirs and ours, lay twisted in broken positions. Dust hung in the air like breath that refused to leave. The squad regrouped, ragged and bloodied. 2 men down, another limping, his sleeve soaked red. The lieutenant's fury hadn't cooled. If anything, it sharpened. He stormed toward her, shoving his helmet back, eyes blazing. You're a liability, he spat. First the roof, now this, you should have put him down. She met his stare, jaw tight, silence her shield. But silence wasn't enough anymore. Say something, he snapped, grabbing her vest, yanking her forward. Because if you can't explain yourself, I'll explain it for you to command. His hand shook with anger. His voice shook with something else, desperation. He needed her fault to make sense. But before she could answer, the older soldier stepped in. That's enough, he said, steady voice carrying weight that wasn't rank but years. The lieutenant turned on him, snarling. You saw it. She hesitated again. The older soldier didn't deny it, didn't defend her either. He just looked between them, then said quietly, she's still here, which means she's still fighting. It wasn't absolution, but it was protection. The lieutenant's jaw clenched, his grip loosened. Finally, with a shove, he let her go. But his eyes promised this wasn't over. Night fell heavy again. They holed up in another ruin, smaller this time, tighter. The squad's numbers were thinner now, their breaths heavier, their nerves stripped raw. No one spoke much. The silence was heavier than the walls. She sat apart, cleaning her rifle with hands that moved steady but heart that churned. Her mind replayed the moment, the boy's face, the tremble in his hands, the weight in her finger that refused to move. She told herself she had spared him because he was a boy, because killing a child wasn't war, it was murder. But deep down she knew the truth. It wasn't the boy she had seen. It was her friend. Every time she aimed at young eyes filled with fear, it wasn't an enemy anymore. It was the rooftop. It was the grin that had vanished into silence. And it was her fault. Later, when most of the squad drifted into uneasy sleep, the older soldier found her again. He sat beside her without asking, setting his rifle down with a grunt. You're not the only one who's hesitated, he said quietly. Her eyes flicked toward him, but she stayed silent. "I saw my brother in a scope once," he went on. "Wasn't him, just a boy who looked like him. I froze, too, cost a man his life." The confession hung heavy. He didn't look at her, just stared into the dark. "Doesn't go away," he added. "But you learn something if you live long enough. Hesitation isn't weakness. It's proof you're still human. What you do after, that's what matters." She wanted to believe him, wanted to let his words crack the weight on her chest. But she couldn't, not yet. Because deep inside, she knew something the older soldier didn't. Her hesitation wasn't just about the past. It was about the target they hunted now. The one hidden in these ruins. The one tied to that rooftop years ago. And when the time came, when the mission narrowed to her and that target, she wasn't sure she'd be able to pull the trigger at all. What made silence more dangerous than sound? Not the absence of noise, but the presence of doubt it carried. The squad marched again, thinner now, moving through streets where shadows bent sharp and the air still smelled of gunpowder. 2 men gone, another wounded. Their formation wasn't just smaller, it was fragile. Every glance, every step carried tension like glass about to crack. She walked near the back, rifle steady, but she felt it pressing in. The lieutenant's eyes, the weight of suspicion. Even the younger soldiers, their faith shaken by blood and smoke, whispered more with their stares than with their mouths. And the older soldier, he didn't defend her anymore. Not openly. He just walked close, as if proximity could be protection, as if his presence could balance the scales she had tipped. But scales didn't balance easily. Not when the night carried ghosts. They stopped in a half-collapsed building as dusk bled into evening. Walls cracked, ceiling sagging, but it offered cover from eyes above and ears below. The lieutenant spread a map across broken stone, flashlight beam tracing lines through ruin. His voice was sharp, precise, clipped, but underneath, anger still simmered. "We push through here," he said, tapping a street. "Intel says our target hasn't moved, but the longer we wait, the colder it gets. Tomorrow we finish this." He glanced up, eyes flicking over the squad and landing on her. Longer than necessary. Nobody spoke, but the silence wasn't agreement. It was fear, weariness, and something else. That night, as the squad settled into rest, she couldn't. She lay with her back to the wall, rifle within reach, listening to the uneven rhythm of sleep around her. Someone muttered in their dreams. Another coughed. The wounded man shifted, stifling a groan. She closed her eyes, but the darkness didn't bring rest. It brought memory. The rooftop again, always the rooftop. But this time, her mind played it slower. She saw the grin first, the easy one, the one her friend always wore, even when danger pressed close. She saw the sudden stillness, the sharp crack, the way the grin vanished like a light switched off. And then she saw herself. Not the moment she froze, not the breath she couldn't take, but what came after. The way she pulled the trigger too late. The way the shot still dropped the enemy, but seconds after it mattered. The way she turned and saw only silence where her friend had been. That was the truth. She hadn't just hesitated, she had failed. And now, every hesitation wasn't just fear of killing. It was fear of failing again. A sound snapped her back. Boots, light, deliberate, moving closer. She shifted, eyes narrowing in the dim light. The lieutenant, he didn't sleep either. His rifle slung, his jaw clenched. He stopped in front of her, crouched low, voice low but hard. "Why are you really here?" She said nothing. Silence had always been her armor. But this time, it wasn't enough. He leaned closer, his face a shadow broken by the flashlight's edge. "You think I haven't noticed. You freeze when it matters. You hold back. You're hiding something, and I'll find out what it is." She met his eyes steady. If he wanted fear, she wouldn't give it to him. His lip curled. "You're gonna get us killed." For a moment she thought he'd strike her. The tension in his hand, the flare in his eyes, it was close. Too close. But he didn't. He stood, stepped back, spit to the side, and whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "When this mission ends, you're finished." Sleep never came. By dawn, her eyes burned, but her rifle was clean, her pack ready, her silence unbroken. The squad moved again, the city narrowing around them, streets tighter, buildings closer, every shadow sharper. The wounded soldier limped, refusing help. Another rubbed at his temple, muttering prayers under his breath. The younger one, barely 20, walked stiff with fear, fingers twitching near his trigger. And the lieutenant, sharper than ever, barking orders, eyes darting, jaw grinding. She knew what he was doing. If he couldn't break her in words, he'd break her in battle. The trap came at midday. Not an ambush this time, a silence too perfect, a street too empty, windows too clean. The lieutenant saw it too. His hand rose, halting them. His eyes swept, then cut back toward her, as if daring her to see what he saw. She raised her rifle, scanned the upper floors, shadows, curtains. And then movement. Her breath caught. Not the target, not yet. But a child, a girl, standing in a window, eyes wide, hair tangled, hands pressed to the glass. Her chest tightened. Not again, not another child. The lieutenant hissed, "What do you see?" She hesitated, then answered, voice low, rough from disuse. "Not them, just a girl." The squad shifted, confused, uneasy. The lieutenant's glare could have cut steel. But before he could snarl, before he could turn her words into a weapon, the sound came. A crack, then another. Not at them, not near them. Above, behind. Signals. The air shifted, the city seemed to lean closer. And then they knew. The target was here. Waiting. That night they found shelter in the basement of a shattered school. The walls smelled of mold and dust. Broken desks lay piled in corners. Chalk dust still clung to the floor, as if children had only just fled. The lieutenant paced like a wolf, restless, circling. The squad muttered low, their nerves shredded, their faith unraveling. And she sat apart, back against the wall, rifle across her knees. Her silence wasn't armor now. It was strategy. Because she knew something none of them did. The target wasn't just another enemy. The target was tied to that rooftop. To the moment her friend died. To the hesitation that still haunted her. And tomorrow, when they found him, she would have to choose. Pull the trigger. Or let fear finish what it started years ago. How close could you get to a ghost before it stopped haunting and started breathing again? By morning, the city felt like it was holding its breath. The squad moved quiet, weapons drawn, every corner a threat. Their numbers were thin, their nerves thinner, and in that weight of silence, the target was closer than ever. She felt it, not with her ears, not with her eyes, with something deeper. The way every shadow seemed sharper, the way every heartbeat thudded louder, the way the air itself carried memory. The lieutenant led, jaw clenched, steps clipped. His suspicion hadn't cooled, it burned hotter, closer to open flame. He wanted her to fail, he needed it. And maybe she thought he was right. They entered another ruin, 4 stories of fractured stone, stairwell half collapsed, windows jagged as teeth. Intel said the target was here, waiting, surrounded. The squad stacked against the wall, breath tight, rifles raised. The lieutenant gave sharp orders, splitting them into pairs. Her assignment was with the youngest soldier, barely 20, barely more than a boy himself. His hands trembled against his rifle, his breath uneven. As they climbed broken stairs, his voice cracked low, almost whisper. "You ever think about not coming back?" She didn't answer. He swallowed, eyes darting. "I think about it every night. How my mom's gonna get that letter. How my little sister's gonna ask why I didn't try harder. And I don't know what to tell her. I don't even know if I should have come here." His honesty hit her harder than gunfire. because beneath his words she heard the same fear that lived in her, the same weight. She finally spoke, her voice rough, quiet. "You came because someone had to." He looked at her, eyes wet, searching. "And you?" Her silence stretched. She wanted to say she came for the mission, for the squad, for the flag stitched to her sleeve. But the truth was sharper. She came for her ghost. And if she failed here too. She didn't finish the thought. The firefight came sudden. Third floor. A door kicked open, a spray of bullets tearing the air. The boy dove, screamed, fired blind. She snapped into position, rifle steady, squeezing off controlled bursts. Shouts rang through the building, chaos ricocheting off stone. The lieutenant's voice cut sharp, "Push up now." They did, room to room, step by step, fire meeting fire. Every wall bore scars. Every corner carried danger. And then the moment. The target. She saw him at the far end of the hall, older now, scarred, eyes cold but alive. Her breath stopped, because she knew that face. He had been on the rooftop. The rooftop where her friend died. The rooftop where her hesitation cost a life. The rooftop where her ghost was born. Her scope locked on him, but her finger wouldn't move. Not because he was innocent, not because he was young, because he was the reason her silence existed at all. Every second stretched, every heartbeat a drum. The lieutenant's voice roared, "Take the shot." The boy beside her shouted, "Do it." But she couldn't. Not yet. Because shooting him wouldn't just kill a man. It would break open everything she had buried. The target raised his weapon. And that was when choice stopped being optional. Her friend's grin flashed in her mind. The boy's trembling voice echoed in her ear. The older soldier's words pressed in. "It's not hesitation that defines you. It's what you do after." Her breath steadied. Her finger pulled. The shot cracked sharp, final. The target fell. And for the first time in years, the rooftop faded. Not gone, not forgiven, but quieter. The squad surged forward, clearing the room, shouts filling the air. The target lay still, mission complete. The lieutenant stormed toward her, fury mixed with disbelief. "Why now? Why not before? What the hell were you waiting for?" She didn't answer, she didn't need to. Because this shot hadn't been for him, or for the squad. It had been for her. For the ghost that had chained her silence. For the friend who no longer grinned. For the boy who still carried fear. For the soldier who reminded her she was human. Her silence wasn't hesitation anymore. It was resolve. Night came again. The squad, fewer than before, huddled in the ruined shell. The younger soldier sat close, eyes wide, relief raw. "You saved me," he whispered. She shook her head. "We saved each other." He didn't argue. He just leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes, breath shaky but steadying. The lieutenant didn't look at her. Not that night. Not with anger, not with suspicion, just with something harder to name. Because he had seen it too. The moment she chose. But she knew the mission wasn't over. Killing him hadn't erased the ghost. It had only transformed it. And when morning came, she would carry something new. Not fear. Not hesitation. Resolve. The kind that didn't fade. The kind born from silence. The kind that would never let her forget what it cost. What do you carry when the mission ends? Not the rifle, not the gear, not even the scars you can see. It's the silence that follows you home. The city was quieter when they left, not safe, not healed, just quiet. The squad moved slow, step by step, through streets marked with ash and ruin, their numbers thin, their faces gaunt, their breaths ragged. The target was gone, the mission finished, but victory didn't feel like triumph, it felt like survival. And survival was heavy. The wounded soldier leaned on another's shoulder, his sleeve soaked, face pale. The younger soldier walked behind her, eyes darting less now steadier, though his hand still twitched on the rifle. He looked at her sometimes, searching, grateful, unsure what he'd seen in her. The lieutenant led as always, but his stride had changed. Not softer, not slower, just different. Every so often, his eyes flicked back to her. No accusation this time, no fury, no suspicion. Just a look he didn't put words to. And maybe never would. They reached the edge of the ruins by dusk, a ridge of broken stone beyond which stretched the path home. Extraction, a way out. The squad collapsed in the shade of a crumbled wall, packs sliding, rifles resting. No one spoke much. Exhaustion spoke for them. She sat apart, back against rock, rifle across her knees. The city stretched before her, shadows long, light fading. Her silence didn't feel the same. It wasn't weight now. It was space. Space to remember. Space to breathe. The younger soldier shuffled closer, sitting beside her. His face was pale, streaked with dust, but his eyes carried something new. "You didn't have to save me," he said, voice quiet. She didn't answer. He looked down, fingers picking at the dirt. "When I froze back there, I thought I was done. I thought I'd never see another sunrise. But you," he stopped, swallowed. "You gave me another chance." Her chest tightened, because she hadn't done it for him, not only for him. But maybe that was the point. Maybe saving one meant saving all the rest too. The lieutenant broke the silence then, his voice rough from dust and fatigue. "We'll be pulled out tomorrow." No one cheered, no one sighed. Just a nod here, a breath there, relief muted by loss. He looked at her when he said it, not a warning, not a threat. Just a statement. And when his eyes held hers, something shifted. Not trust, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that she had been tested, and she had endured. Night fell, they lit no fire, no light, only stars above, cold and distant, watching without judgment. She lay awake, as she always did, rifle within reach, listening to the uneven rhythm of others' sleep. But the rooftop didn't come this time. Not the grin, not the crack, not the silence after. Just the stars, and the sound of steady breathing around her. For the first time in years, her ghost wasn't louder than the night. Morning came, extraction, helicopter blades in the distance chopping the air, a rhythm that meant the end. The squad gathered their packs, lifted their rifles, moved toward the sound. At the ridge she paused, turned back, looked at the city one last time. Smoke rose in thin trails, shadows stretched across stone. The ruins didn't remember names, didn't carry grief, didn't honor silence. But she did, and she always would. When the helicopter lifted them away, the younger soldier sat across from her, clutching his rifle, eyes on the floor. The lieutenant sat stiff, gaze out the window, jaw set. The older soldier leaned back, eyes closed, breath heavy. She sat in the hum of the blades, wind whipping, the world shrinking below. And in that roar her silence held. Not as hesitation, not as fear, but as resolve. The kind that endures when words fall short. The kind that doesn't ask for recognition. The kind that lives unseen, but never forgotten. What do you carry when the mission ends? Not victory, not pride, not glory. You carry the faces of those who didn't come back. You carry the weight of choices that still echo. You carry silence. And sometimes silence doesn't break. It becomes something stronger, something lasting. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.